Dave Blick has been researching for many, many years. Dave has a way of hooking me into the things that he's working on in one way or another. And so when I sat down with him to review the PowerPoint presentation Friday afternoon, he decided he wanted to tag team this presentation. So for those of you who came to hear Dave, you'll hear him part of the time, but unfortunately you'll have to hear me part of the time too. So he and I will tag team this presentation. And I think without any further word, we will go ahead and start. Dave, you're on.
I still don't think 85 qualifies as old. Okay, as Gretchen said, this is a work in progress. It's been in progress for a number. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes.
Okay, that's not easy. But anyway, it's an interesting thing I've been working on. And when you get involved with Gretchen, you see you don't move fast enough, and she helps you along. And quite frankly, in the last year and a half, she's done all the research now, and she has all the files. And I haven't had access to the files for a while, so it's a work in progress, so please accept it as such. We're going to talk about a young man from Marblehead who graduated from, you know, in the old days, there was no Danbury High School. Yes, the Danbury school board paid the bills, but it was always Lakeside High School. And this was a young man from Lakeside High School. And so we'll talk about it. We're going to take us back because it crosses so many little things. So when you do you're concerned about the history of the peninsula here, you get involved with so many little details. Okay, we're going back to about the turn of the century. My century, you know, back to when 1800 became 1900, that to me is still a turn of the century. I still can't believe that it's happened again, but it has. And so Marblehead, of course, had already been quarrying stone for 70 years. And but there were things happening there, and we'll try to reflect this. So a gentleman showed up in what? Oh, you don't press where it's marked. You are below. Okay, we're learning. Whatever happened to the good old Kodak kerosene? Okay, February 3rd, 1893, Fred William Norton, and we think it was Fred and never Frederick, was born in Marblehead, Ohio. He's not registered in Port Clinton in this thing, to a Frank Jr. and Catherine Kate Lynch Norton. Okay. There were two Norton families, two Lynch families, pardon me, two Lynch families that had come over, of course, from Ireland. The first one came before the Civil War and served as a soldier in the Civil War, married a local girl, and if I'm correct, it was the daughter of the man who owned the Boylan Farm, which is now Lynn and Oak Streets, and was also Irish. And the other one came as a man with a wife and a couple of young children. They fit perfectly as brothers, except we've never been able to make it sure. Now, whether these two Lynch families were really related or just shared the name, that's one of the first mysteries. Now, how many of you remember Phil Lynch? Oh, boy. All right.
You're the really old in the room, Dave.
All right, now. Right here, exactly, was the front porch of the Slack House. And this was the front porch where Phil Lynch sat, because this was his real estate office. He was the #1 real estate man in Lakeside in the 40s and 50s. Well, he died in 46. Known by everybody. He started out as a barber and had a barber shop in the pavilion for a while, in the old pavilion. So he was from the other Lynch family. So there were two Lynch families here. Now, they were proud of being Irish. There were a few Irish families around, but where did Norton come from? Well, here again we've got another mystery. There is we found a Frank Norton Sr., who had a little about 17-acre fruit farm on the Portage River just outside of Elmore, Ohio, which is what, 35 miles away. Frank Pitts, Frank Jr. came to Marblehead, married the Lynch girl. We think it fits that he was, Frank Jr. was a son of Frank Sr. And the original name, as you'll see here, was Franz Nortenheim from Alsace-Lorraine, which of course is a province in, depending what year it is, it's either in France or in Germany. And but the name said he was of Germanic extraction, as was his wife. And so, but they were married in Marblehead, and the only for sure thing was that there were a lot of cousins at Lynch's. Strangely enough, though, although he had all these cousins, none of them were boys of about his age. So we think his friend, who he grew up with now, he went to St. Joseph Catholic School. We see the school here. The building on the left was the old church as it would have looked when he was a young boy. It's now a nice stone church there. The other building next to it is now a stone building too. It's their sort of St. Joe's Parish Hall. It was their school. It was a wooden building, but it's now stone. It's covered. But the back part of the building is one story, and it is stone. It's the old Molitor House, which was a castle-like house out on Bay Shore. So that's a solid Marblehead history here. When the early days in the his father was listed as a laborer. And of course, there were a lot of laborers out in the quarry at that time. In fact, at one time there were 1,000 men worked out there. But at this time they were changing over, they were mechanizing. And so by 1900 he's listed as a steam shovel operator. And so he's still blue collar, but he's moved up to the good jobs. And the Slovaks were coming in and doing the real manual labor. And again, many things that is taking place just today in politics, which we're not get into, but the Slovak men were from a region in the Carpathian Mountains, which is just south of Poland. It was a mining area, and it was actually part of the Austria-Hungary area, but they were not Hungarians, they were Slovaks. They would come and live sometimes it was 20 men in a house in a room, and they work 6 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, and they would come and work and shut down, the quarry shut down in the winter time. There was no, they either tried to find work someplace else, did a little fishing, or if they'd saved their money, they had enough to get the passage back to Slovakia, where they had family, and sometimes girlfriends, and even sometimes wives. And gradually they were bringing their wives over. And gradually Marblehead was becoming a Slovak town. Now, St. Joe's Church originally was made up of Irish, Italian, and German Catholics. But by the time Fred was a young man, the Catholic Church had to put a priest in who spoke Slovak. Of course, the Mass was still in Latin, but the Roman was in Slovak. And so the English-speaking people had to settle for second Mass. So, you had this going on in Marblehead. Now, you had a business class that primarily were concerned with the Congregational Church, and you didn't have many of the 8th grade, the Catholic school and the public school, both ended at 8 grades in Marblehead. And so this was it. But the high school in Lakeside, which was up on the hill here, okay, was the building was just torn down a couple years ago, and who came there but Fred Norton. And his classmate was the doctor's daughter. He was out of place, but somehow or other he was, and little by little in the Peninsula News, you read a little thing, Fred Norton and his sister, who was a year younger than he, played the prelude at the movies the other night, the silent movies. His sister played accompaniment to Henry Newman, who was a only Jewish merchant that I've ever known of in Marblehead. And of course, we don't know what instrument Fred played, but we know probably his sister played piano. She accompanied Fred because, Newman, because he was probably playing the violin. Frank, his father even showed up in a blackface thing in a hall above what's now Starcher's hardware store, St. Marie's Hall. And so they were moving into the middle class in Marblehead. And Fred came to high school. He was 1 year late. There was a mystery between, he was a year older than he should have been as a freshman in high school. But whether he changed his mind later on or whether he worked in the quarry for a year, we don't know. We're still looking for him. But he was supposedly an honor student, and we say in the column, we see where he, from time to time, and his sister were attending parties where, quite frankly, they were probably the only Catholics there. But they were accepted. And finally, at the end of 4 years, the first Ottawa County track meet was held, and he was the outstanding star. So, supposedly he had a straight A student at school. And all these little things we keep trying to find the exact things, but of course, as you know, the newspaper burned down in '29, and so we have to get what we can. Now, another mystery year after his graduation. We don't know what he did when he was 19. But when he was 20, his father, by this time, his sister had married his best friend. Fred was the was the
Best man.
best man. Yeah, it was a man of honor. And so anyway, all of a sudden, Fred's father, mother, and his sister and brother-in-law were given jobs at the Maple Cliff Quarries just outside of Columbus. And Fred was down as a freshman at Ohio State University. Now, how did they find a young man from a very small school who hadn't even played football because they didn't have a football team? They played basketball, and baseball, and track. Well, again, we put two and two together. There was a company, a family that's been on the waterfront for years, Hoyer was the name. They were in the top end of the insurance business in Columbus, and they would come up, the father and son. The son had been the captain of the football team early on at Ohio State, and was also the chairman of the athletic committee. They're here, they're Lakesiders, they're on the front. Fred's coach and the Prof. Ward had a cottage nearby on the lakefront. Now it's amazing that here, you know, they all show up at Columbus, and Fred is now a freshman at Ohio State, and Gretchen has done an amazing job of going through these records, and he was a star in track, football, baseball, and basketball for 4 years. And again, he was well accepted. It wasn't, we didn't have many poor worker sons that worked at Ohio State playing football, but he was well accepted. Supposedly, again, a straight A student. Here again, I obviously skipped a lot here, which you can see. Okay, at the same time in Marblehead, when he was growing up, it was the birthplace of aviation. It was the beginning of aviation. Cedar Point, George Beckling, the manager, was quite interested in aviation and was getting people to come in airplanes, and there was two pioneers in Sandusky who were trying to build airplanes. There was actually an airplane that was being built in Marblehead, next to the restaurant there, which is an open field where you pay $2